Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As you probably, hopefully know at this point, I'm Ashley Splar. I'm the Adult Services and Community Engagement Consultant with the Connecticut State Library Division of Library Development. Together with my colleague, Kymberlee Powe, our Children and Young Adult Consultant, we are always excited to bring you the GELS series, the Growing Equitable Library Services. And for this session, I am particularly excited to have Kim share with you a presentation that she originally created as part of the Children's Literacy Foundation conference in March of this year, called Building Diverse Classroom Collections and Facilitating New Conversations. For those unfamiliar, CLIF is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to inspire a love of reading and writing among low-income, at-risk, and rural children up to age 12 throughout New Hampshire and Vermont. So Kim is traveling virtually often. I will share a link in the chat when I'm through if you're interested in learning more about their work. I did have a chance to attend that conference and see Kim's session and promptly asked her to do it as part of our GELS series, because I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned, whether we're at public libraries, school libraries, or otherwise. Even though, as you can probably tell from the title, this really is geared towards the classroom. So keep that in mind as we go through. A couple of housekeeping items before we dive in. Please mute yourselves if you're not already. If your participant name does not have your name in library, if you could update that, it tremendously helps as we take attendance. I have turned on the live caption feature, so please feel free to adjust that and use it as you see fit. All the tools are in that bottom toolbar. We are recording today's session, as you note, and we will make the recording as well as the slides available as part of our YouTube GELS playlist. I will put that in the link in the chat for you as well. And as always, you will get a survey following the workshop. We appreciate you taking a few moments to fill that out. It helps us continue to plan and deliver continuing education programs. As we go through, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat. If it's a clarifying kind of question about the presentation, we'll probably address it right then. We might save some of the sort of more meaty ones to discuss at the end. You're welcome to use the chat or the raise hand feature and unmute and speak your question if that's simpler. With that, I will stop talking and turn us over to Kim.
Thanks, Ashley. So yeah, this presentation is called Building Diverse Classroom Collections and Facilitating New Conversations. I had done another presentation for CLIF and they wanted a reason to hear something else. So this is kind of what we identified as a need in the New Hampshire and Vermont area, and Ashley thought it would be helpful in Connecticut. So here we are. So like she said, my name is Kymberlee Powe. I'm the Children and Young Adult Consultant with the Connecticut State Library. So today we're going to be going over what I've kind of called what we're up against. So the data with regards to the publishing industry, some conversations that folks might need to have with themselves. Before diving too far into this, we're going to do a quick overview of the diversity audit. I have done more recordings than I think I can even count on a diversity audit presentation. So it really is going to be an overview, and anyone who wants to know more about that can just watch the recordings. I'm not doing so much of that presentation anymore. Then we're going to talk about how to have these conversations with kids and teens. We're going to do a flash of some additional resources that are hyperlinked that you can kind of poke through at a later time. And then we'll leave some time for questions. So we're going to talk a bit about the publishing industry and just sort of the layout of that. So this chart here, which is hyperlinked. So everything that you see that you think you might want to look at later is hyperlinked at the end of this. This chart was compiled by Lee and Lowe in 2019, and it's a breakdown of the publishing industry by race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. This chart was compiled from 7,893 responses within the variety of the publishing industry. Those responses were compiled from 153 publication companies, including all of the big five, like the Harper, Penguin, all of those, 8 review journals, 47 trade publishers, 35 university presses, and 63 literary agencies across North America. And like I said, these are all hyperlinked, but in the hyperlink specifically for this image, if you click there, it'll take you to the Lee and Low website where there are actually 7 other charts. So the 7 other charts look at the publishing industry in these same breakdowns: race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. But it looks at them on the various levels within the publishing industry. So someone might look at this and think, but, maybe the executive level is this, or but maybe the reviewer level is that. So the other charts and sort of the other levels that Lee and Low has gathered information for is the executive level, the editorial level, the sales level, the marketing and publicity level, the book reviewer level, the literary agent level, and the intern level. And they all shockingly look basically like this: majority white, majority cis women, majority straight, and majority non-disabled. So the reason that I start that I put that at the beginning of a lot of my presentations on literary equity is so that people, I hope, kind of see the reality of the fact that the system isn't set up for libraries to unconsciously curate inclusive collections. So the system is not set up for you to just like grab a bunch of lists that have been dropped on Twitter or released through like a Penguin newsletter, buy everything, and do this type of work. I kind of don't like calling it that, but just for the sake of keeping my brain together, this type of work, the way that it really needs to be done. So my hope is that more people veer away from a kind of copy and paste model, and we begin to build our collections intentionally and take ownership of our collections, especially if we also want to go out and say that we are doing DEI work, social justice work, social and emotional learning work, if sort of that's a language that we want to use when talking about how we work within the library or school community. We can't just copy and paste, right? Because that's kind of cheating. So when thinking about your classroom collections, and I know there's like all sorts of librarians here, public, school. So I'm just gonna say classroom collections because that's what the title of this is, and you can do the verbal manipulation in your mind. But so when thinking about your classroom collections, think about, are most of the books in your collection about Indigenous people or, Indigenous people historical? Do most of the books in your collection about African-American or Black characters take place in urban spaces? Like we don't see Black people in suburbia or rural spaces. Who is represented in your LGBT collection? If you are saying that you have an LGBT collection or you have LGBT books in your collection, well, who? Because all of those letters mean something totally different. Are most of your books about Latinx characters about immigration in some way, shape, or form? Immigrating to America, illegally coming to America, or being undocumented in America? Because that's not everyone's reality. That's not even most people's reality, maybe. And are the books about marginalized people in your collection written by marginalized people? So some of these singularities are the things that can happen from blind list ordering. So if you're not careful, like you can look up and your LGBT collection is all G, right? Like it's all gay males. It might be all gay white males. It might, and we might be ignoring the other letters of the LGBTQIA plus community. You might look up in all but like a handful, 5 or 6, and they might be 5 or 6 books that you can ramble off in this moment. All but 5 or 6 of your books about Latinx characters might be about one of these things, right? Illegally coming to America or immigrating in America, right? As if there's not another reality, or if there's less prevalent of a reality for, this group of people that we are talking about. Or, most of your books that feature African-American or Black protagonists feature some sort of gun violence, right? As if that's sort of all we're shrouded in. So basically, and I feel like I'm probably going to repeat this in a million different ways. We got to steer our own ship. Or if you don't want to steer your own ship, then like don't steer your own ship. But then this might be really useless. This might be a really useless presentation for you, because I'm a very big proponent of teaching someone to fish instead of giving people. I will never give anyone a fish, probably not even a toddler, right? Like especially with regards to racial inequity, marginalizations. We just can't do this work authentically like that. So just prepare yourself. So I also like to be really upfront and honest about the difference between a diverse collection and an inclusive one. What did I even write over here? Oh, so we need real stories about real characters, and that realness includes characters, understanding their sexuality, facing racial discrimination, being body shamed, existing in spaces that aren't accessible, and like a whole host of other experiences tied to a marginalization. We also want to see characters of all different backgrounds hiking and playing sports and contributing to the intellectual field and dancing ballet. And we want to see more than like Misty Copeland, right? Like, we love Misty Copeland. We want Misty Copeland books, but we can't have only Misty Copeland. So, we can't sort of lean too much into the folks that we can sort of quickly count off on our fingers. We want to see people of all different backgrounds, like fighting with their parents or falling in love or going on some like wild adventure with, I don't know, a group of people who can all magically wear the same pants, right? Something like that. We want to see people living their lives in all class fields, with all different types of marginalizations. And our collections really need to show that there's more than one way to walk through life. We need to kind of get out of this possibly subconscious mindset that lumps people into these binary pods, because that's just not the reality. So there is a snippet of a TED Talk that I am going to share, and I'm going to sort of let the talk do the talking. TED Talk did the talking. No, I should have tested this. It's okay. Can you see the YouTube page, Ashley?
From Liberty Mutual.
No, we can't.
It's okay. It's all right.
We see the presentation page.
That's all right. How about now? Do you see Liberty Mutual?
I see YouTube.
Thing. Like Marco's backpack.
Grammarly helps you work
so
more
we're just gonna sit
efficiently,
through.
which makes accomplishing your work goals easier than ever.
Going to.
A few years ago, I became a mother. The place you see this, I think, most clearly in children's books is in a series called Ordinary People Change the World. I would probably never have noticed this series, but every time I'm somewhere children's books are sold, I peruse. And I was perusing. And I found this. I am Jackie Robinson. And even though we have many books in our house about Jackie Robinson, and they're excellent, I reached to purchase this one because I try to vote with my dollars, right? This is what we do as consumers. When we buy something, we vote yes to this sort of thing. And I absolutely want to vote yes to children's books about people who look like my son. So I reached to purchase I Am Jackie Robinson, but I had to stop. And it was the book next to it from the same series that stopped me. Because from this one series, Ordinary People Change the World, I was standing in a store looking at a copy of I Am Jackie Robinson next to a copy of I Am Albert Einstein. Please do not misunderstand me. Both of these people absolutely deserve to be celebrated. I have no problem with books celebrating Jackie Robinson and or Albert Einstein, but in that moment, in that store, what I was looking at was the subtle, and I am sure unintentional message that one person changed the world through sports and another, who was just a genius, the genius just happened to be the white guy. So, okay, I went home and I went straight to the series website, just hoping against hope that this was just an unfortunate pairing. That surely, when I looked at the series website, I would find a black intellectual and a white athlete, and I would promptly order the entire series and immediately commence a joyful dance of gratitude. But as it turns out, in addition to Jackie Robinson and Albert Einstein, the other people this series says have changed the world are Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, Amelia Earhart, Lucille Ball, and Helen Keller. Again, all absolutely deserve to be celebrated, but think about the message that's sent. The range of ways in which white Americans have changed the world. has been academia, flight, activism, comedy, and the presidency. And the range for Black people was civil rights and sometimes sports. And we already think it matters who children see and who they don't see. I want my child to see the book about Duke Ellington or Mae Jemison or Neil deGrasse Tyson, Richard Pryor. The books are out there, they're just much harder to find. Because usually, if we tell a story about a person of color, the story is actually about the person's color.
And we're gonna stop right there. While I go back and sort of reorient my presentation, Ashley, have any questions come in at all?
No questions yet, but I'll just remind everyone to feel free to drop their questions in the chat, or you are welcome to also raise your hand if it's easy to speak the question. We'll find you and get to your question.
Great, and you can see my slides now, not my notes?
Yes,
Okay,
I
great.
can.
Okay, lovely. So while we didn't have a chance to see the whole presentation, again, it is hyperlinked at the end of this presentation for anyone who might want the slides. A large point of my presentation is tied to hoping to empower people to do what this mom did, right? Which is like, take a beat and just sort of think beyond what people are throwing in your face. So dive a little bit deeper and go a little bit of the extra mile. Again, especially if we're the type of people who are like, I want to work to build a, socially, emotionally, and racially conscious library. Like if that's something that you were saying, taking sort of a page from this person's playbook or this particular playbook that we saw, I think can go a long way towards building not only diverse collections, but inclusive collections that are equitable in the classroom. So the kids who go to the shelves of your classroom library, or any library, I guess, they deserve books that entertain them. And, they deserve books about like ghosts and powers and witches and shapeshifters. And I think on some level, we all know this. I hope on some level, we all know this. We just struggle to locate them. And we sort of battle time. The fact that there are so many hours in a day, and yeah, there sure are. I don't think neither myself or Ashley will fight you on that. So I just want to just sort of point out, I guess, sort of the obvious to folks, because sometimes something is so obvious that it's kind of missing or it's easy to overlook, right? So I think something that's also important are the conversations that we have with ourselves while we are selecting the books to go into our classroom libraries. And I think we have to work on ourselves when we're doing this. So again, I am not here to give the answers to people. In that way, I don't know what kind of presenter that makes me. Again, I'm hoping to sort of teach some folks how to fish. So that way, this is the type of thing that you can do with longevity instead of wait for like the expert to just like hand you a list of things to buy. So when adding books to your library classroom, or building something into a lesson plan, right? Or like a book discussion or some sort of group that you're orienting around literacy, I think it's important to ask yourself, like, why am I choosing this book? Like, why is this the book that I'm deciding to make a part of this lesson? Is it because I saw it on Twitter? Is it because I've read it? Is it like, why this one? And then how does this book compare to other books that I already have on my shelves? So if I'm adding, X title, do I have like 7 other titles that are basically the same story by a different author with maybe a bit of a twist? Is it the same thing? Is it something new? If it is the same thing, have my kids been asking for that? Or am I just sort of like assuming that this is what they want? Just kind of take a beat and think about it. What is the possible harm done versus the possible knowledge gained by adding this book to my collection or using this book in a classroom discussion or using this book to teach a lesson? And if I am using something to teach a lesson, can this lesson be taught in another way? Am I just doing, this way because that's the way it's always been done, or because like I'm mandated to, or do I have some wiggle room to kind of make adjustments based off of the needs that I see before me? Is there another book that I can use that's going to teach this thing better? Is this the only book? Is this the best book? Is it the best book because I know it's the best book? These types of questions. And again, I'm not answering this for anybody, but I think that it's really important that folks sort of stop, take a beat, just like that lady who, maybe did buy the Jackie Robinson book. I don't know. And if you look on that website, it's not a whole lot better. I think they've added Malala since then, which also deserves to be celebrated. So going through sort of an example of this thought process, right? When identifying books to embed into the classroom or to youth learning, we tend to think the goal of think about like the goal of integrating a title. Do we want to spark classroom conversation about justice and law or good and evil, right? Like what do we hope folks get from this? So let's sort of go through some titles that can be thought deeply about. So To Kill a Mockingbird, right? There's probably not a person that does not have some sort of connection to this book. Either they were assigned to read it in school and read it and loved it, or they were assigned to read it in school and like didn't finish it, right? In some way, shape, or form, people are connected to Kill a Mockingbird. So it's a book that takes place during the Great Depression. It's a book about a Black man that's falsely accused of raping a white woman. Some of the themes in this book are like good versus evil, racial prejudice, courage and bravery, justice versus the law, knowledge and education, a lack of institution, and a loss of innocence, right? Some of the major, like if you Google the themes of To Kill a Mockingbird, these are probably going to come up. So almost everyone in school is assigned this book to read. Now, whether you read it or not, live your best life. But almost everyone in school is assigned to read this book. And I think fairly young. I want to say like my siblings in like the 8th grade were assigned this book to read. So then there are other books like Dear Martin. It's a book that takes place in, I think, like the 2010s, maybe the 2020s. It's a book about a Black teenager who's falsely accused of literally everything. Everything that a person can be accused of, Justice is accused of in this book. That's his name, not Martin. So some of the themes in this book: good versus evil, racial prejudice, courage and bravery, justice versus the law, knowledge and education, a lack of trust in institutions, and a loss of innocence. If you Googled, what are the themes of Dear Martin? These would probably come up. Maybe not as clearly as they would with To Kill a Mockingbird, because it's been so embedded into educational life, but the themes are the same. So one more, Internment, a book that takes place in like the near future. It's about Muslim American people being sent to internment camps. Something shockingly similar happened in our own country within the memories of some of the, maybe our own grandparents or great grandparents. So some of the themes of this book: good versus evil, racial prejudice, courage and bravery, justice versus the law, knowledge and education, lack of trust in institutions, and loss of innocence. And I know this because I've read 2.5 of these books. I'm sure we can all guess the half that didn't get finished. Again, so sort of going back to classroom libraries, like we think like the goal of the book, we want conversations about, a lack of trust in institutions, and we want conversations about, courage and bravery, and we want to have conversations about racial prejudice, but for some reason, we tend to lean towards To Kill a Mockingbird to do that. Which, okay. I'm all messed up in my notes. So when we are thinking about the books that we are using or assigning in school, I think sometimes we need to think about what are the titles that we, as the grown-ups in the room, are familiar with that address the themes that we are interested in teaching or conversing about with our students. Because a lot of times we are going to pick the books that we are familiar with. So what are we reading, and what are we spending our free time sort of leaning into? And, how widely read are we? So while none of us get paid, to sort of read books off the clock, typically folks who are affiliated with literature in their work, we read at home, right? Like I've got a book next to me. I've got like 17 audiobooks through the Palace app that I kind of listen to at different moments. These are things that a lot of us, not all of us, if you are not someone who does this, feel free to ignore me, I guess. But for those of us who do this, how widely read are we? What decisions are we making that we then may embed or not embed in our classrooms? Are we integrating the inclusivity we hope to transfer into the classroom into our own lives? Are we walking the walk or just talking the talk? Now, To Kill a Mockingbird is often held up as one of the best books ever, and I'm gonna have to take the words of the other people for all I can do is say you must be right. Right, and in the resource section of this presentation, you're gonna find an article, references to an article where Dear Martin was actually removed from a classroom reading list. So folks lobbied, there's a story, like you all can read it, but Dear Martin was removed because of whatever reasons they said in the book and the article I genuinely don't remember. And Dear Martin was replaced with To Kill a Mockingbird. You know, I don't know, do what you're gonna do, right? But the themes here on the surface of all of these books are all the same. But To Kill a Mockingbird examines themes such as like racism from the white perspective. And Dear Martin and Internment examine the same themes from the Black and Indigenous and person of color perspective. So when we're having conversations, when you are having conversations with yourself, when I'm having conversations with myself, or for that matter, when we're having conversations with administrators, colleagues, and caregivers about why you've chosen a particular title, if you feel like you need to, change the way you're having this conversation, right? I am the world's biggest fan of mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, but depending on who you're talking to, they don't care, right? So sometimes we have to put the science back in library science. And I know some of you aren't librarians. This is just like what I got because I'm a librarian. So put the eater back in teacher. I don't know. You know, I'm not sure what the educator slogan is. I'm sure there is one. Sometimes we have to, while talking about social and emotional needs, while talking about making kids of color in our classrooms feel comfortable, also talk about the themes. I mean, like take a screenshot of this and like hand it to someone and be like, look, the themes are the same. You know, this is the type of conversation we're hoping to, you know, instigate in our classrooms. All of these books have the potential to instigate the same conversation, but these two, the same conversation and extra, right? So talk about the themes, right? Put together some information like what's here, and do what we all know as folks who work with literature and books and youth know is the right thing to do, and put it in a measure that can be presented in different ways depending on who it is that you're talking to. So Social Justice Books created a guide for selecting anti-bias books, which is also linked in the resource section. The guide includes information on illustrators, which I like, which kind of makes it applicable for picture books, as well as, you know, everything from picture books to Kill a Mockingbird. So this guide asks you to do things like look for stereotypes, tokenism, invisibility, check the relationships between the people in the story. So this is sort of moving beyond the themes. This is when you sort of, this is when a book that might have good themes but be problematic in other areas can potentially be migrated off the list of potentials, if that is a goal that you are, like if you are, again, intending to do this work, as we call it. Consider the effect on children's self and social identities is a super, super, super strong one. There may be a child in your classroom who does not open up their mouth and say anything in the robust class discussion, but they might be super negatively impacted based off of what they're reading in the conversation that's being held, especially if when things start to get out of control, they're not like squashed before they go too far. And I mean, that might be white kids too, right? I mean, maybe some white kids have, you know, biracial relatives, or, you know, it's their neighbors. We can't just look at our classroom, assume we have a classroom full of white people, so the same problems don't persist. And we also need to remain cognizant of the lessons that we are teaching, either by acknowledging something or not acknowledging something, right? Watching for loaded words. Look at the copyright date. It's not that the older something is, it's going to be bad. Like, it's not just you throw, I'm not like advocating for getting rid of Little House on the Prairie, keep it. But just be cognizant, just be knowledgeable about what you have. So Lee and Lowe also created a classroom questionnaire that allows users to answer questions sort of in a broad way of strongly agree, NA, disagree, or strongly disagree with regards to your collection as a whole. It's kind of like a mini diversity audit, right? You're not going through each individual title in your classroom. You're sort of looking at it at a whole. It asks things like, this classroom library, so not individual libraries, but individual books, but this classroom library contains numerous books that, right? Like feature Native American / Indigenous main characters, or feature diversity throughout the year. Or this classroom library contains some books that include harmful stereotypes about a group of people, or misrepresentations of a group of people, right? So you're not going through things individually, you're looking at your collection as a whole. So to quickly touch base on a diversity audit, again, real quick. First, there's auditing your collection, there's using an analysis tool to get data about your collection. And there really is a difference. So an audit takes an inventory and determine what's in a collection and what areas need to be better developed. So we can look at it as like, putting the science back in library science. Again, I know not everyone here is a librarian. An analysis tool is typically going to paint like a broader picture of a collection. And while it provides really useful data and can be helpful when time is of the essence, right? Like just when you're trying to do something relatively quickly, it's not going to be as detailed. And depending on why you're going through your collection, it might affect sort of the end result. So again, like your analysis tool might tell you that 10% of your collection features Indigenous people. It doesn't tell you if all of those books are about Indigenous people like before 1800. It doesn't tell you that. So if you're trying to really obtain concrete and detailed information, an audit takes a long time, which is fine because it took us a long time to mess up our collections. It's going to take us some time to fix them. But it's work that needs to be done by people. So when you are auditing your collection, you establish the criteria you want to audit for, which I'll hit on the next slide. Generate a shelf list or go through each title one by one. You research each title for the representation, essentially for the criteria that you've identified in advance. You count and math it up, and then you apply that data in meaningful ways. So when deciding what representation it is that you want to research for, it can literally be anything you want it to be: race, religion, culture, sexual identity or orientation, body inclusivity, various neuroabilities, if someone is neurodivergent, if they're not, physical ability, mental health, socioeconomic status. So with these audit factors, you can also audit genre. So if you want to know what percentage of your collection is historical fiction, sci-fi, things like that. So many, many moons ago now, I made a template for auditing a collection. So if folks want to do an audit of their collection, they are welcome to this. Like, it exists on the LibGuides under inclusive collections, I think is like the name of the LibGuide. And folks are welcome to download it and use it to audit their collection. So when I do presentations on collection audits, people often ask for benchmarks. Well, they ask, well, what am I striving for? Like what percentage breakdown do I want my collection to be in? How am I going to know when I did it? Like when I've done the thing that I wanted to do. And normally I don't answer that question because I don't want folks to like make sure that their collection is 0.2% Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander and then stop looking for those books as vigorously. But for the sake of giving the people what they want, what I did was I went to the fast facts for the US Census, and this is the information right here. So according to our last census, this is the percentage breakdown of folks in the country by race or races. So if someone is looking for a number to check up against, as well as a number for disability for people under 65, if people are looking for a number to check and balance up against, then that is where I got these numbers from. Coming up with something to measure your collection up against when we're talking about people who are members of the LGBTQIA+ community or who are neurodivergent is a little harder to find, particularly the LGBTQIA community, because understandably, people aren't willing to raise their hand and be like, hi, I'm trans, count me. And different organizations count people in different ways. Some people are more honest, they found, with those sort of like anonymous online surveys, as opposed to talking face-to-face with someone, because it can be life-threatening and dangerous for people. So that information is not as easy to find. That's just kind of it. It's just not easy to find for incredibly understandable and important reasons. So when we say apply the data in meaningful ways, if we are talking about a classroom collection, so it might be a little different if we're talking about a public library, but if we are talking about a classroom collection, I suggest using it to compile your data. And I don't know about anybody else, but I love a good pie chart. Love a good pie chart. It's just so colorful and interactive and gives really great information. This is a space where you can use that data to make a case for more non-traditional titles in your classroom. Non-traditional, I'm saying in air quotes. I'm just trying to find ways to say this because this is recorded. Non-traditional titles in your classroom. You know, if administrators are like, why this? You can hand them the pie chart and be like, well, this is why, because our collection is like super out of whack and unbalanced. You know, you might be able to use something like this, not only with administrators and sort of caretakers, you know, whoever it is that comes into your classroom shouting why, you know, you can use this for your own personal, like, is edification a word? Okay, I think I saw it in like a movie, but I wasn't sure if they'd made it up. So that you can be more cognizant of the titles that you continue to bring into your classroom. And again, like, one of the reasons that I'm really supportive of auditing a collection as opposed to using an analysis tool is because of the unbalanced nature of so many collections. And when I say unbalanced, like I said, I talk about diversity and inclusivity. So again, you might find that 10% of the books in your classroom feature characters with like some type of disability, right? Which is great. We really want disability representation in our literature. And 10% is, you know, above the census percentage of people in the country, you know, who have reported that they have some type of disability. So great, you are above the census number. But a deep audit of your collection might tell you that like all of that representation are about kids in wheelchairs. Like, we did it, we found the one disability that everybody has, and that's what we have in our book, or all of the characters or a majority of the characters are blind or low vision. So, or maybe all of the main characters are white or assumed white, which completely cuts out the realities of living an intersection of being a racial minority as well as someone who has a disability. So, you know, that stuff, depending on the audit tool that you use, you might not get that information, which is why I support audits. But, you know, we got to do what we got to do. So, man, is this one going to play? I don't know. The computers have been wild today. So just to kind of like put the cherry on top of that, I've got another clip, possibly. Man,
I can see the video, but it's not playing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. I don't know. They all used to play. Okay, so we're going to... You have to bear with me through these Hulu ads. Oh no! Okay.
Oh.
Thanks, YouTube.
Thank you so much. Do you mind if we start recording?
Yeah, go ahead, of course.
This is Chiari Rome interviewing Adrienne Bell for Dark Stories in the Light. First off, thank you so much for this. As you know, diversity is such a hot issue right now. And this podcast is looking to find and really honor those stories of diverse employees such as yourself who find themselves working in traditionally non-diverse work environments.
Well, I mean, I guess you wouldn't expect someone like me to be doing PR for artisanal goat cheese.
Exactly.
Because everyone knows that I am partial to Wensleydale.
Well, yes, but it's also because they...
Okay, who am I kidding? You're right. I'm a Stitchelton girl all the way. Guilty as charged.
Okay, well, why don't we just start from the beginning of your story? Tell me a little bit about how you grew up.
Okay. Well, my mother was a narcissistic college professor, and my father was a chemist. He actually lost his sense of smell, and that kind of sent him into a deep depression. And so, you know, things were tense, but we muddled through.
And how often did you see your dad?
Every day.
Oh, you lived with your dad. Okay, how often did you see your mom?
Also, every day I lived with both my parents.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about the neighborhood that you grew up in.
Oh, I don't know, pretty typical for a family like mine, I guess.
So, like, a little rough?
Sometimes, sure, yeah.
Could you describe that a little bit? Feel free to lean into that memory.
Well, there was this one thing that always happened. The turnover for the guard gate was really, really high. And so like every 2 months, it'd be like someone else new there, and they didn't have the codes, and so like none of the cars could get in or out.
You lived in a gated community?
In high school, yeah. My dad patented this like...
Okay, I don't think this is gonna work out.
Oh, is it the shortbread fingers? I do have bourbon creams. I'm just afraid they're stale.
Yeah, we're looking for like a black story.
Well, I am black, and this is my story, so doesn't that make it a black story?
You know what I mean.
You want to hear of struggle? Well, let me tell you about riding side saddle or waiting for the right to vote.
Well, it's not like my life was never hard, okay? I don't escape into Victorian fantasy for no reason.
Go on.
Well, look, I was weird, I was awkward, I was uncomfortable, and when I started reading about the Victorian era and everyone was so elegant and polished, and everyone just knew exactly what to say and exactly how to say it.
Did you drop a hip-hop track? Did you go to jail?
No.
Okay, we're done here.
Oh, I assure you, darling, my narrative is as black as my Uncle Stefan's lungs after he died of a consumption.
Can I get you a snack for the road?
I'm sorry about the mix-up, but if you do happen to remember anything that's a little bit more on brand, you can totally give me a call.
Joke's on you, madam. These bourbon creams aren't stale at all.
Do I live here now? Do I live in this? Do we have an escape button? Oh, okay, there we go. So it's a really fantastic show called Black Girl in a Big Dress about a Black girl who escapes into, you know, Victorian fan fiction. I don't know, cosplay. It's a really fantastic story, and I encourage anyone who is interested to watch it. But I like this clip because it sort of encapsulates something that I see a lot in the book community from both readers, publishers, and those like presenting books to youth, where they tend to focus on one facet of a person's life, i.e. their race, like what the lady said in the TED Talk, you know, focusing on the person's race instead of focusing on the person, which includes their race. And I think we can personally do so much better than that if we're willing to take the time to, you know, dig a little bit. We can find books about magic and science and performance and social justice. The and is all caps for social justice, because we need all of this. All of this makes up the realities of the world. And it's really important that our collections are diverse and inclusive, right? Otherwise, we're kind of, I don't know, we're not doing it right. So conversations to have with your classroom. So I understand that conversations like this make people uncomfortable, especially if it's not a reality that they have to live. So folks they feel uncomfortable, and that's fine, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle that. So when having conversations with your kids and teens in your classrooms or book clubs, there's a lot of people here. One of the big suggestions that I have is to establish agreements before any work that might make you uncomfortable. And there's a link here to what's called ropes agreements, which someone can take and use. But I am a greater proponent of coming up with your agreements with the classroom. Crowdsource them. Make sure all of the kids and or teens agree on them before you start these conversations. Things like step up and step back, which means if you realize you were doing a lot of the talking, maybe step back to allow someone else to step up. Discuss, don't debate. Debate being a word for kind of like fighting or shouting something in. We were having a discussion, not a debate. And something for the kids, but more so for the adults, is lean into discomfort. Many kids, especially young kids, kids are taught to feel uncomfortable about things by adults. So lean into discomfort and curiosity. And there's a whole host of sort of ropes agreements. But I really, really advocate for coming up with those with kids, and making sure that they vote and that they agree with them before starting conversations around books like To Kill a Mockingbird. So I also think that sometimes there's pre-work to be done, and that pre-work is done by the grown-ups. Do you feel comfortable with the conversations that you think you're about to have from the book that you're reading? Why or why not? What can you better do to equip yourself for difficult conversations? And if need be, are you willing or able to do additional work, which might be listening to a podcast or something to educate yourself? I don't have the answer. I'm just giving you some suggestions. Be honest and clear when having conversations, particularly teens. They'll spot a lie a mile away. Present the information in age-appropriate ways. So sometimes younger kids, little kids, can understand DEI topics better from a space of like fairness. We teach kids at a very young age what is fair and what is not fair. Not sharing is not fair, right? That is language that we use with kids all the time. So if they have questions and they're younger, sometimes broach the topic from a conversation of fairness, whereas older kids might need facts. They might need, well, this is just how it happened. This is just it, folks. It depends on who you're talking to. When in doubt, refer to the agreements. If things start to go left, refer to the agreements, remind everyone in the room that they all agreed on the agreements, so need to adhere to them. You might be surprised by the way that works, not only with kids and teens, but adults too. Sometimes asking something like, I would love to hear more about that, and can you dive deeper, can really not only pull out more deep conversations, but again, if things start to go a little left, those are some of the things that you can ask to get some clarification, right? Because maybe, especially young kids who are still forming their words the right way, they might not mean what they say at first. So we might have to kind of pull out, what it is someone's actually trying to say. When in doubt, put it in the parking lot. It's okay to say, you know what, Jimmy, that's a great question, and I'm not entirely sure what the answer is right now. Why don't you take a Post-it and put that in the parking lot, and then, I'm going to look for the answer, and we'll, pick that up tomorrow. Or better yet, assign 2 or 3 kids in the class to go home and do their own research on something and bring it back and sort of present what it is that they learned or found out, and then, move on with the conversation. But you have to make sure that you come back to the parking lot. You can't just kind of toss things there that make people feel a little bit awkward and then never come back to them. And then be upfront and honest with adults. So again, talking to adults about the education behind a book selection. Again, that's putting the science back in library science. Prepare yourself for difficult conversations, which might require some lifestyle changes if you're willing to do that. Watching different types of documentaries, listen to different types of podcasts. reading different types of books, man. Like, I mean, we all want our beach read romances, you know, but you might find if you're reading about different cultural backgrounds, you're going to still get the summer beach romance that you want, but you're also going to learn a little something and feel a little bit more confident having conversations about, you know, non-white cis people, able-bodied cis people. Use your students to build inclusive collections, ask them what they want more of, and maybe they say mysteries, and then you go out and find mysteries with marginalized characters, right? Unless your kids are saying, we want white people, you know, that's typically not what someone means. They're asking for a genre or something that they're interested in. Audit your book purchases or the books that you bring into your collection. Make sure you're asking yourself why as you're adding books to your library collection. And just something to remember for the school system in particular, DEI is not a literary unit. I am asked a shocking amount of times for books on someone's diversity unit in class. It's not a unit. There are some resources, some Twitter accounts that I find could be helpful to folks who like Twitter. Some websites, all of these are on my LibGuides, but they're here as well. And these are all hyperlinked to take you directly to this information. Some podcasts, like I said, some folks, you know, reading, not everybody has time to read. I get it. I just learned you can't read a book and crochet at the same time. And that makes my life complicated. So sometimes it's listening to a podcast while you crochet. And some resources and articles, including the second one is the high school that removed Dear Martin after parental complaints and replaced it with Dear Martin from the perspective of a white person. I don't know, man. So my name again is Kim Powe, the children, young adult consultant with the State Library. And I don't think any questions came in, if I'm remembering correctly.
I do not have any questions in the chat yet, but I will pause here and see if there's anyone at this point. If you want to just unmute and ask your question, if you're welcome to, or put them in the chat. Either one.
Hey, Kim Rogers here.
Hi, Kim.
So I'll be really quick. So the diversity audit piece, I think, is really important because it's not always easy finding out what the background of the person or persons writing the book is. Like, you go to their websites and it doesn't say anything except like, oh, taught elementary education, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, tell me really, when you tell me about yourself, how can we move that agenda to have authors really start like telling their whole story?
Well, some might not want to, again, for the safety of it all. We have to realize that some of this stuff, as shocking as it may sound, and at this point, if anyone has a news app on their phone, I would hope we've moved beyond I'm shocked, because like it's not shocking anymore. But the website typically isn't the place to go. It's the Twitter bio. It's a Twitter bio. That's where you'll see flags. That's where you see if someone's a member of the LGBT community. That's where you're going to see pronouns. Twitter bio. Authors are all over Twitter. But yeah, that's sort of the way. I wouldn't spend more than like 5 minutes on any one title. You're not trying to like dig into someone's background like you know, an investigative journalist. We're trying to find the information they're willing to share with us. Webpage, Twitter bio, and I would stick with those two. If it's not there, they're not ready to share.
Thanks. Great question, Kim. And answer, Kim. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions? Christine.
Hi. So actually, this was too long to type. And I'm not sure, I think as I'm talking, I'll find the question in here, so bear with me. But so I was tasked with helping the teachers in my school build more diverse classroom libraries. I took one look and saw the state of their classroom libraries was atrocious. And so I've been doing some professional development with them to try to get them on board with this. And it's not that they're resistant, but I'm having trouble having conversations with the teachers in my building to get them away from, you know, some of the pigeonholes and pitfalls that you talked about. You know, they want everything to have some sort of social justice theme or something like that, which of course is not a bad thing, but they can't see beyond it because they think it's not useful for the curriculum. And I'm just wondering if you have any good, I know. So I'm wondering if you have any good things about, I made them a list and I put things, like, here's an India Hill Brown book. It has nothing to do with social justice. Please buy it for your classroom. And they're like, but why, when I can kill two birds with one stone and I can buy this other book? And, I'm having trouble having those conversations with the teachers that literally up until 2 weeks ago had any, like you said, like non-white, disabled character in a bin in their classroom labeled diverse books. And so I'm just trying to get to a point where I can have conversations with them to figure out so they can understand. And I'm just wondering if you have any inroads like on that.
You can show them these presentations and let them look at a Black person telling them don't do that. Right? Like, I mean, and I don't know, like, school systems are so hard because so many people want to lock things into a curriculum, and like, great, right? Like, we all got to take the SATs maybe and go to, I don't know, go get a job. So, from that perspective, I understand it. But the danger is now you're beginning to tie human people with feelings and emotions to a test. And if you want to do that, then do it, but then like sort of move away from conversations around authentic DEI work, because it's not what it is. That's authentic test prep. I don't know what that is. But it can be harmful when someone looks up and they're like, my family's been here since we moved Texas down, right? Like, it's just not, oh man, these are some New England things. Hey, I'm not from here. I respect New England, but like every once in a while I'm reminded that these are not where my roots are. But I really think, and maybe some folks might have to sit and think about, what is your goal? Is your goal to view students as people, marginalized students as full people, or is your goal to pass the test and not have any conversations? And the thing is, if these books are done right, books about like Jewel Parker Rhodes' Paradise on Fire, about getting lost in the woods, it's on fire, if a book is about someone of a different race and culture, their race and culture is going to be in the book. If it was written by a not white person, it is going to, because our race, our culture, our sexual orientation, our disability, our neurodivergence plays a part in our lives, and it is going to be present in the book. But that doesn't mean that everything needs to be right? Like The Hate U Give. Like, not everyone's life needs to be shrouded in gun violence or bombings or like sneaking away from ICE. That's giving a narrative. It is giving a real narrative, and it is giving a narrative that needs to be shared and discussed and learned. But that's just it. It is a narrative, not the only narrative. There is a video that I'm going to send you. I pulled it out of a presentation because of like some squicky stuff that I'm still researching. So before I want to share it on a large platform, like I want to make sure I am settled in there. But it really does a fantastic job of like making people sit and think about this. So I will send that to you for sure. But sorry, keep going. What else was there? I know that's hard, man.
All I was going to say was I'm so glad you brought up that book in particular, because I have that book in my library. I pushed it on a couple of fourth grade teachers, and I said, they finished up some sort of, I don't remember what it was. It was some sort of adventure book. And they were like, we don't know what to do next for the classroom read aloud. And I gave it to them, and I said, your kids will love this. And it's funny that they will take it when I hand it to them and I say, read this book. But if I give them a list, they say it's not good enough. Right. So like, it's really hard to, so I guess
no one's digging under walls. No, man. And I think something that can help in I mean, I don't know that everyone has conversations like this, but I find that sometimes like if conversations happen too like talky in circle-y instead of just like hitting the wall, right? And instead of being like, are you trying to say that everyone who is of Latinx, background like snuck their way into America? Because right now that's what your books are telling people, and like literally waiting for an answer. Like honestly being like, no, this is a real question. Sometimes like the talky aroundy just causes more confusion. None of my presentations are like that because like I don't get to talky aroundy how I walk through the world. So I think sometimes like, and that's again with the work of shaking off the discomfort, like discomfort isn't helping anybody. Discomfort is just being discomfortable. Discomfortable? Yep. It's the end of the day. Discomfort is a valid emotion that deserves to be acknowledged. And then we work, right? And then we do some real work. So I don't know, I don't know what the conversations are like, but like, hey, sometimes we gotta come in like a wrecking ball, as Miley Cyrus says. A polite wrecking ball that won't get you fired, but a wrecking ball.
I will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Maybe we can talk about this later.
Thank you both. I'll pause and see if there are any more questions. We are at the top of the hour.
And I see yes slides, yes recordings. The Diversity Audit Workshop has been recorded a ton of times. I'm doing it one last time for Niche Academy, and then I'm retiring it. But that being said, if folks do with, and I mean, this goes for you too, Christine, like if people want to share the video and like make sure that a group of people watch it and then have a conversation, like I'm happy to jump in and help and be a part of that. I'm just like, it's very scripted and I'm just like so tired of reading literally the same words over and over. But some of that might be helpful as well. Getting information and then having like an open conversation about what it is that you watched and learned and said workshop might be helpful.
And that is the LibGuide link that I put in the chat a couple of times. You can find the link to the diversity audit presentation, the slides, as well as that spreadsheet that you got a little snippet of in this presentation as well.
Yep. Keep my LibGuides organized. I try.
You do good. All right, well, I am not seeing anything else come in. I want to acknowledge and thank you, Kim, so much for being willing to do this presentation in Connecticut. I learned a lot. I learn a lot every time I sit through one of Kim's presentations, and I thank her for doing that work. Thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I should have the survey link ready to go, but I do not, unfortunately. You will get it all in an email. Please take a moment and fill that out. Again, it just really helps us. And with that, I want to thank you all and wish you a happy afternoon on this.
Wish you a quick rest of the week, man. This is dragging.
Tuesday. All right. Thank you. Take care all.